Okay. It is November 2nd, 2023. This is our regularly scheduled city council meeting for the city of Glenwood Springs. You want to take roll?
Mayor Wuso.
Present.
Councilor Godis.
Here.
Councilor Zelinski.
Present.
Councilor Weimer.
Here.
Councilor Schachter.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any agenda changes or conflicts? We'll take that as a no. Any council announcements? Any of upcoming events, things that we want to shout out? And we'll close that section. Let's keep this rate going tonight, everyone. I am going to turn it to citizens appearing before council. This is for items not on the public agenda. I do not see anyone from the public here, so I am going to look for anyone online. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment section and I'll bring it back to council for a motion to approve the consent agenda. 1 second. Councilor Weimer.
I move we accept the consent, approve the consent agenda.
Perfect.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We pass unanimously. Bringing it back to council for our first item of the evening, which is the presentation of our 2022 financial audit. And I'll have our official city manager. No, I will have Yvette bring it on up. Okay.
Want to do budget first?
Okay, so what we're gonna do then is we're going to, do you want to just jump into the budget?
I'll do
Okay, great. So this is our very first official item where our official city manager, Steve Boyd, will be not interim, but official.
When do we do that? This is gonna hurt, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so each year we pass a budget. We've been through a number of work sessions. We submitted the budget to you guys in the first meeting in October. There was a public hearing on the budget last week, and then tonight we need you guys to vote to adopt the budget. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions on the budget? Counselor Godis,
If it'd be appropriate, I could make a motion.
would love it.
Move we approve resolution 2023-38, approval of the 2024 City of Glenwood Springs budget.
Do I have a second? Counselor Zelinski. I second. We'll call the question.
It's unanimous.
Hey, a big
Thank you,
thank
Council.
you.
It passes.
Yeah, thank you to the entire finance department. You guys work hard and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna bring it back to council now and Yvette, and we are moving back to number 8 on the agenda, presentation of 2022 financial audit.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. In September, we finished our 2022 audit. So tonight, Paul Bacchus from our audit firm, McMahon and Associates, is going to pop on and just kind of give you a brief summary and then just ask that you accept the budget or the audit for 2022.
Thanks, Yvette. Thank you, Council. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I am working at another client's this week. But I'll just introduce myself. My name is Paul Bacchus. I'm a CPA. I actually live in Avon, Colorado, and I'm with a firm called McMahon and Associates. And we do audits for, I don't know, 30 or 40 different municipalities. I think we audit pretty much all of CAST, Colorado Association of Ski Towns. And I'm pleased to be here tonight to just briefly walk you through the audit process and try and answer any questions you may have. I'm going to actually share my screen here. And I think sometimes people are not always entirely aware of what we do when we do an audit. So I'm just going to walk you through the process a little bit. So this is actually your audit binder. And if you look, there's planning, fieldwork, and reporting are kind of the three main areas. And so planning is really about understanding the internal controls that the city has. And so if you look here, you can see this is a whole write-up on internal controls over ambulance, building, cash disbursements, receipts, finance, fuel and parts, IT, so forth, so on, kind of all the way down. And what we're doing is we're meeting with your departments and we're trying to understand, how does money come in, how does money go out, and we're looking for any problems with your internal control structure. The other thing that we do during that process is we'll pull databases. So this year we pulled, I guess, looks like purchase orders, check register, vendors and employee lists, and P cards, and we're actually data mining. So kind of the olden days of auditing, you would run random samples, but most firms, or I guess forward-leaning firms, don't do that anymore. So this is just an example, and I think it's so cool. I just always have to share it. This is a data file of all your purchasing card transactions, every card for the city, for every employee. And then what we'll do is we can sort by employer summary and kind of look at each of those. We run words and phrases, and we're looking for PayPal, Venmo, tickets, Ticketmaster, Etsy. And you can see here's where Etsy comes up, and we can look at weekend transactions. And then we also run certain data testing on it. So this is, for those of you that are math nerds, this is called Benford's law. And so when you take a database, you can see the first digit should show up 30% of the time. In this particular database sample, it shows up 30.14% of the time. And so that tells us that, as an example, if you have a $5,000 purchasing policy and we see a lot of fours pop out in a database, then we'd know that, oh, maybe people are using their P cards to get under purchasing policy limit or something like that. So we do a lot of kind of database analysis testing similar to that. After we've kind of completed all that, we're pulling invoices and going through and trying to understand everything else that happened at the city. You can see this is a review of all your minutes during the year. So we go through, read all your minutes during the year. We go through any related entities you have, like the Downtown Development Authority, that you have a fair amount of control over. And we want to make sure that we're handling those correctly from a financial reporting standpoint. And once we're done with that, our planning is done. So then we move on to field work. And field work is about verifying the numbers. So as an example, we take a balance sheet approach. So if you look in here, you'll see we're going through cash and investments. And an example is each of these is a cash and investment work paper. We have in here your investment policy right here, and legal investments for the state statutes. And each of these is an account. And if you have X dollars in the bank, we actually want to know that that money is in the bank. It follows your investment policy. It is a reasonable, prudent investment for you to have. This is the work done in your call of trust statement. And you can see the A&I fund had $455,000. And so we verify that that's what's actually on the books. Then we send bank confirms to them. We actually confirm with the State Banking Commission that all these funds are covered by either FDIC or a different thing called the Public Deposit Protection Act. But the goal is to make sure that if you have cash in the bank on your financial statements, that it's actually in the bank and available to be used. Same thing with accounts receivable. This is your receivables for your governmental funds. Each of these is verifying an account. So if somebody owes the city money, we want to make sure those dollars are deposited timely when they're paid. The person gets credit for their payment. It goes into the correct account. Same thing with your proprietary funds, whether it's electric or water and sewer. And we want to make sure that those dollars are getting deposited as soon as possible and coded to the correct customer and in the correct account. We go through your capital assets. So each of these is a work paper tracking your capital assets. We look for assets through kind of data mining your books, and we want to make sure if you purchased an asset, it gets added to the list, it gets depreciated appropriately, and it's, you know, insured and tracked. And same thing with disbursements. If you're getting rid of an asset, is it being handled properly in accordance with statutes and town policy? We go through all the accounts payable. We want to make sure anytime you're making a payment, it's related to town business, it's budgeted for, it's paid timely, so we're not paying interest, late fees. We're coding it to the correct account. So if we look at your financial statements and we see that a repair and maintenance bill it needs to be in a repair and maintenance account and not in a payroll account. And really the goal is, you know, to make sure that all the expenditures going out are accurate and reasonable for the town to undertake. Same thing with payroll. These are all your payroll policies and various payroll plans you have. And we go through and reconcile back to what's been reported to the IRS, make sure we filed the correct forms, making sure we have all the employees set up correctly in the database. We actually mine your employee addresses and compare them to your vendor addresses to see if we have anybody that's in both systems and things like that. The town is kind of a medium-sized town, and or I should say the city. And you do have, like all cities, have a fair amount of debt obligations. So those can kind of exist in a couple of different forms. They can be COPs, they can be general obligation bonds, or they can be revenue bonds, depending on what they're used for. But debt gets issued and say you want to build a new transportation center, you issue those bonds, and there's a lot of promises that town makes when you do that. And so we go through and make sure that you've complied with all those promises, because those bonds get sold throughout the world and they're in municipal bond funds, and you know the SEC looks at all those things. And we want to make sure your bond ratings are as high as possible. So we go through and make sure that you've complied with all the promises that you made. Same thing with leases. Governmental accounting standards now don't really differentiate between leases and, say, a bank loan. They view it as just a different financing vehicle. So we have to record those leases, whether you're the leasee or the lessor, on your financial statements. Equity is things like your Tabor reserve and any other reserves, debt service reserves we have. We want to make sure we've handled those correctly. One of the uses of the audit also is the Colorado Environmental Health and Public Health and Environment, I guess, Department goes through and checks some EPA compliance as far as making sure you have adequate resources to monitor the landfill when it's closed, and you're monitoring all your wells and test wells and things like that. We go through, I have here kind of ballot questions that go back a ways. Anytime the city approved a ballot question, we want to make sure that, you know, you follow through and we're doing what we promised the electorate we would do. That if, you know, A&I taxes increased in 2016, that we're using it for what we promised we would. Same thing with intergovernmental agreements with all the other governments that you have agreements with, whether it's, you know, raft on bus use or something like that. We work with Carl and your attorneys to make sure we've handled any legal contingencies you'd have. And then we spend quite a bit of time going through state statutes, just trying to make sure we complied with that. And then there's another part called the single audit, which is auditing for the federal grants. So it's a lengthy process. We have a number of CPAs, and you can see we pulled into your work papers 681 different work papers. And, you know, that's about what I would expect for a government that has $75 million rolling through it. You know, it's neither large nor small. But the whole goal is to produce this report right here. And this is called an ACFR. And I believe this was in your packet, and it's only 159 pages long. So I'm sure you all devoured it with the same joy that I do when I get financial statements, but you want to keep in mind it's really not just for council. So this is going to go to obviously council. It'll be available on your website for the electorate should you choose to accept it tonight, but it's going to go to the SEC and all your bond holders. It's going to go to the federal government for federal grants. There's a whole section in here for them. It goes to the state government. There's a section in here on like highway user money, so you get your highway user money. It goes to your insurance agencies. It goes to bond rating agencies. There's just a lot of different parties that use it, and that's why it's kind of so lengthy and long. But I will point out that there's kind of two levels of reporting that municipalities do. One is called general purpose financial statements, and the second is called an ACFR. The ACFR is has more detail, and it's generally applicable for larger governments. And then you can submit your ACFR, this report, to the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, and they will also review it along with us to determine, how your financial reporting is. And you can see last year you did receive this Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So that is an award that the city gets, and congratulations. That's a nice feather to have in your finance team's cap. And then as far as our opinion goes, it's in here as section A, and that is referred to as an unmodified opinion. And it means it's, some people call it a clean audit opinion. And it means all those parties that use it can rely on the financial statements and know that the numbers in here are going to be correct for their purposes. It's not that we don't have a typo here or there. I try not to make sure those things happen, but sometimes they do. But we're really confident in all the numbers that are in here. And that's because there's 681 work papers plus however many we looked at and didn't scan that kind of stand behind this report. And the report has all kinds of financial information in here. It has, this is called the management discussion and analysis. It has kind of where your year-end resources, what's happening with sales and use tax. We like it when these charts go to the right and up. And there's budget actual statements. There's, federal government statements. There's debt statements in here, kind of all kinds of information. And the city, like all municipalities in Colorado, is required to have a December 31st year end. So I'm not going to go through a lot of detail in this because you're getting this information from your finance team. But I just kind of wanted to explain the process that we go through when we do an audit and kind of how much work it is for your finance team. The other part that I would like to go through, though, is a letter that goes with the audit, and it has some communication items in here. And the first is we have to kind of describe what happened with accounting policies during the year. The city implemented this new accounting standard, which was required. There's this group called GASB. Maybe you've heard of FASB. They're in the news a fair amount, but this is Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they set the standards for what financial statements look like for a government. And they implemented this or required this new standard called 87 on leases. And basically it describes how leases have to be shown. The city implemented that, which was no small task. So thank you to Yvette and her team for getting all that information. It's not only leases that the city has, but anywhere where you're the lessor have to be implemented. And that did have an impact, resulting in, we had $332,000 to the beginning net position for your business type activities. I think some of those were airport leases and things like that. But that was implemented and really quite smoothly. The second part of this paragraph is what are the biggest estimates. So sometimes we have some hard to estimate items, environmental liability, maybe a legal liability, something like that. For you guys, it's pretty standard. It's how long are your assets going to last, but you use standard useful lives. I wouldn't change that. Are you going to collect your receivables? really you do collect all your receivables. The exception is some of the ambulance receivables, like all medical receivables tend to have more bad debt than you'd think, but at least compared to other entities, the city has lower than industry average bad debt, but that's really the only thing. And so we record an allowance for uncollectible on that. And then the third estimate is there's actuarial information that on the fire and police pension. So they're part of this group called FPPA, and we go through and have to record a liability for that pension liability. But FPPA is really well funded, and it's not an issue as far as underfunding of pensions in Colorado. No real difficulties in counterperforming the audit, other than you guys are in the middle of, well, you're at the end of implementing. So you got new software, I think 4 years ago, and the way software works is you get different modules that do different things, like an accounts payable module, a capital assets module. And so you have this plan to implement these, and that did delay the audit a little bit this year. But really, I think when you have that all finished and up and running, and you kind of have a couple of years under your belt, you're going to be really happy with the software you have. And the city really did need to change. The old software was maybe one step up from an abacus. That's an accounting joke for those that don't follow. Then there's corrected and uncorrected misstatements. These are journal entries that we worked with Yvette and her team to make. None of these are concerning to me at all. Where I have concerns with journal entries that we'd make, I mean, a lot of these are to implement new accounting standards, but where I would have concerns over journal entries if we were adjusting cash, adjusting accounts payable where you paid something you shouldn't, or a receivable where you received something or didn't bill something. These are all kind of related to various accounting standards that we do on virtually all our clients. No disagreements with management. I know we've had some management changes there, but we didn't disagree with any of them. So on how things were presented, your finance team signs a management rep letter that just says we didn't lie, cheat, or steal, and we just have to tell you we have that on file. And then two things. One is there is a new reporting standard where we have to take your IT software arrangements and just make sure they're charged off over the time period that you approve them. So when you bought new software, you paid a higher upfront cost, we'll amortize that off over the licensing period. But we'll work with Yvette to get that implemented. And then there's two recommendations here. One is just in looking, when we met with your rec department at the community center, there was some challenges getting backup for some of the employee drawer cash counts. And, it's not big dollars, but we want to make sure that everything kind of flows according to the process. And we, from our understanding, they had some printers that were unable to print daily, I guess, reconciliation forms for that day. And then they had turnover. But like all good auditors, we really don't have any sympathy for anyone. So, and we report everything to council that we find. So we think, it's definitely worth kind of telling them, hey, we need to make sure and we have backup for our employee cash counts. And then the other thing is there was a couple deposits that took a little more than a week, and we would like those to be, deposited as timely as possible. It's not that there was any missing money or anything like that, but I think there is some areas there that could be tightened up as far as documentation and timeliness of deposits. And then the other is more just an FYI. There's a thing in Colorado called the Great Colorado Payback. If you have uncashed checks, you are supposed to send those to the state, and then they produce this list for anybody that has unclaimed property, and then they can claim it from the state. And really, it's to some degree a cash grab by the state, because if it goes unclaimed, it doesn't come back to you, it goes to the state. But that is the statute, and you just have some that probably needs to be turned over to the Great Colorado Payback. Overall, as I mentioned, 681 different work papers scanned in. A lot of work goes into it. We bring a team of 4 or 5 CPAs on site, some working remotely. And we try and always have one consistent person on the engagement and one new person on the engagement. And then the rest is kind of a mix from our firm of CPAs based upon the schedule. And it's not a small process, but especially with implementing modules. But your finance team did a really good job. It's common to have comments, but those comments are relatively minor for what you would see in a lot of our audits. So that's either a quick or a painfully long review of the audit process, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And then I'm hoping after we're done to get maybe a motion to accept the audit, and then we can make sure it's filed with everyone that needs it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this presentation. Does anybody have any questions this evening? I think that's an indication that you were thorough and that you answered a lot of the questions that we would have. So I really appreciate your time. Every year that we do this, I see the expertise that we are so fortunate to have with your firm. So thank you.
You need the gavel to wake them up.
No, they were good. They were good. They were all up here. We were diving in. So, and I know Jerry McMahon. Very well. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it's a great firm. So thank you so much. Oh, wait, Counselor Schechter. Oh, okay. Counselor Schechter.
Turn green.
I think you're on. There you go.
Thank you. I would move that we accept the City of Glenwood Springs Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for the year end December 31, 2022 as presented by McMahon Associates.
And we have a second.
I second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the time and trust. And as an auditor, we really don't say anything nice about anyone, but thank Yvette also. I know it was a lot of late hours. I frequently get emails from her at 9 at night. And I know getting that whole software implemented is no small task. So say thank you to her and her team.
Thank you. We'll extend that on her behalf. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, we're gonna bring it back up here. Do we have Ashley Badich online?
She is on.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Ashley.
Hey, Mayor.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Hey, everybody.
So I had the honor of spending a couple days with Ashley in DC in the middle of September, and she very adroitly took us through the city and got us in front of the right people. So Ashley, we wanted you to come in front of us to just simply educate, answer any questions, kind of, your vision, the organization, and how we see how we've benefited, but please elaborate. We would love to hear from you.
Sure, absolutely. So I have a couple slides I put together. If I'm able to screen share, it looks like I can. Throw those up while I chat. All right, here we go. So I'm Ashley Badich. I'm with the firm Sustainable Strategies DC. We are based out of Washington, DC and Denver, Colorado, which is where I am. And we've been working with the City of Glenwood Springs since 2016 as federal funding consultants and grant writers. So I am not going to take too long on all of this, but essentially just wanted to provide a brief overview of what it is we do in case there are folks who are not as familiar, and then provide an update on what we've been doing lately and expect to be doing soon. and then just answer any questions that you all have as well. So, Sustainable Strategies DC focuses specifically on local governments. We work on putting together federal, state, and philanthropic grant applications. We work with your staff on identifying projects that align with the city's priorities and then pursuing those projects through grant funding. We also work on just providing the city with updates on what funding is available, letting you know sort of what the landscape is, what's going on in DC at the federal agencies and in Congress. And we help represent the city's interests in securing funding for your priority projects. So our overall client services approach, we work on retainer with the city, which allows us to just be continually working to identify and align funding opportunities with your priorities and then pursue those grants. So we typically put together a resource roadmap, which is like kind of our annual funding agenda. And we've been doing this more informally since we first started working with the city, but just understanding what funding priorities are ahead of the upcoming year. Think it would be great to sort of reboot our resource roadmap coming into the next calendar year, make sure that we're aware of all the city priorities, but we stay pretty on top of things through our monthly calls. So every month we get on the phone with department heads from across the city to tell them what grant opportunities are currently available and figure out if there are grants that we're looking to pursue. We typically write like 10 to 14 grants a year for the city, somewhere sort of in that mix. And that includes a range of like smaller state level grants and regional grants all the way up to pretty large federal grants. We provide a spotlight newsletter that we send out every week that has a couple of new funding opportunities in it. And then we also send out Colorado client alerts that have memos about grant opportunities that Colorado communities should be aware of specifically. And then we do the political advocacy as well, which I'll talk about our DC trip a little bit, just to give an update on that. Our work is across all departments. So we're looking at grants for transportation infrastructure, climate action, public health, arts, culture, local food, really anything that local governments are looking for. We work in that area for grant writing. We've had a lot of success for the city of Glenwood Springs over the 7 years that we've been working with you all. We've been able to pull in over $15 million in grant funding for a variety of projects, which has been really fun to get to see. I actually spend a decent amount of time up in the valley, and my parents are kind of between Glenwood Springs and Carbondale, so it's been really fun to get to see some of the grants that we've secured put into action. So just a brief update on this past year. We have secured in the past year $3 million in funding so far. That's included funding for composting and some upgrades at the South Canyon landfill, both a federal grant and a state grant we were able to secure for composting and improvements at the landfill. We secured some DOLA EIF funding for stormwater infrastructure in the downtown alleys, a $1.2 million grant through CDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is like forward-looking funding that's sort of yet to be determined exactly what it'll be used for, but it'll be safety improvements along State Highway 82. And our application was focused on the 10th Street intersection and 14th and 15th Street intersections. We secured $600,000 in USDA urban and community forestry grants for the Glenwood Tree Maintenance Program and worked with the Public Works Director in organizing around his application to the Emergency Watershed Program to deal with the mudslides. We still have quite a bit of pending funding, actually a very large amount of pending grants at this time, which include a grant application to the USDOT Department of Transportation multimodal grant discretionary program for Southbridge, which is nearly $50 million in funding requested for Southbridge. Within that Department of Transportation program, there's actually 2 grant programs that Southbridge is eligible for. So we've applied under both of those programs. A lot of our DC advocacy was around talking about the Southbridge project because it's such a large amount of funding that we have pending, and we should be hearing about that. I'd say probably by early next year, maybe before the end of this year, but either late this year or early next year, we'll hear back on the rural surface transportation grant through the multimodal grant discretionary program. We also have a pending grant for planning for affordable housing at Veltus Park through the DOLA More Housing Now grant program. And then we recently submitted a planning and project design grant through the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart program, which will support some planning that Public Works is doing for a well field at Veltus Park. Also, just so that you're aware, we applied for a History Colorado Preservation Grant for upgrades at the Community Arts Center, the hydroelectric building, and we were not awarded that grant. So that is a synopsis of our recent work. Our DC trip in September, the purpose of these DC trips is to just build and maintain relationships with your members of Congress and with federal agencies. So what a lot of local governments miss out on is making the rounds with the federal agencies themselves to tell the stories of your projects and to learn about what funding opportunities they have available. Sometimes you get some extra tidbits and good information from meeting in person, and it allows you to kind of build an ongoing agenda and relationship in DC that can really make a big difference in the amount of federal grant funding that you secure. As I mentioned, much of our advocacy with the members in this past trip was with respect to Southbridge, as well as just letting them know what other projects the city's been working on and thanking them for the support that they have provided for a lot of the awards that I just mentioned on the last slide. So we met with the office of Senator Hickenlooper. We met with Senator Hickenlooper. We met with the office of Senator Bennett. We met with the National Endowment for the Arts and had a really exciting conversation about some opportunities for arts and culture grants coming up. And then we met with the Department of Transportation and Build America Bureau, both to discuss the pending grants that we have for Southbridge and to learn about a financing program that they have that may or may not be a potential fit for getting Southbridge across the finish line. But it was a good informative conversation that we had with Build America Bureau. And then we also met with the Bureau of Reclamation to talk about the Water Smart grants and some small storage grants that are actually for reservoirs that we may look at in the future. So just trying to learn more about some of the new programs that they have through Bureau of Reclamation on our trip. A couple updates about the appropriations process. So if anybody's been following the federal budget process, hopefully this won't bore you, but it is relevant to the city because we do have a pending earmark that is in the appropriations bills. So Congresswoman Boebert supported a $1.4 million request to the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee to support Southbridge. That language made it into the bill, which means that if and when Congress passes a budget, Glenwood Springs will be in receipt of that earmark funding. So the current update of what's going on, the Congress passed a continuing resolution to avoid the government shutdown, which has kept the government funded until November 17th. It also led to the ouster of the former speaker. And so we'll see what happens on November 17th. If they extend the continuing resolution, then the government will continue to be funded. If not, we may see a shutdown. In the meantime, the Senate and the House have been moving minibus bills. So typically federal appropriations are passed in omnibus bills, where the government passes all of the appropriations together with a bunch of other riders and things in these big omnibus packages. What's been happening instead is trying to move forward the budget. The Senate has passed a few minibuses that fund like transportation, housing, and urban development, and a couple of the other subcommittees. The House has also moved forward some minibus bills. And then what we're coming toward now is a potential collision course where those bills go to conference, and the minibuses coming out of the House have stripped funding down, and the minibuses coming out of the Senate, hold the funding at the level that was originally passed. So there may be negotiation, and, we may potentially see some of those bills go through, which would mean that several of the agencies that are funded through these subcommittees will be funded for the next year coming out of conference. The Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed to avoid an issue with the debt ceiling has set up some triggers that if Congress doesn't get their act together and pass a budget ahead of next year, then defense funding automatically is cut by 4%, and non-discretionary funding gets cut by 1%. Both parties want to avoid that. So it's supposed to sort of like scare everybody into action on passing a budget. So we'll see if that happens. Our general prediction at this time, and it changes, day by day, is that we will see the spending bills get passed, that the earmarks will stay in them. The House has not been taking the earmarks out of the bills. So we may see those pass by the end of this calendar year. And then just to make you aware of some upcoming opportunities, these are the types of opportunities that we're always sending to your staff and talking about with your staff on our monthly calls. There's several state grants out right now focused on multimodal street improvements through CDOT Revitalizing Main Street, which the city's accessed a number of times. We've applied for those and secured funding. DOLA has opened an additional round of their EIAF funding that's due December 1st. This is like a new winter round, and it includes some additional funding through their new More Housing Now program. There's funding available for DCFC electric vehicle fast charging plazas, for public building electrification. The FEMA BRIC program is hazard mitigation. We are expecting to see some of the big federal infrastructure funds through DOT RAISE come back out this month and be due in January. We're thinking about backstopping the Southbridge request through that program. And then there's the Colorado Water Plan grants that will be coming up in February, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts grants, which we had some great conversations in DC about potential projects that the city has going on that would work for those. And then climate pollution reduction grants that we're working with the city to be proactive in lining themselves up for in April. This is just a note on grant writing process. I don't really need to go into this in great detail, but we really are a full service grant writing firm. We work from like creating a memo about the opportunity on the front end all the way through advocating for it on the back end. And we draft the full grant as well. So that's all that I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. Appreciate the chance to talk to you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Counselor Godus.
Hi, Ashley. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I sometimes feel like we get the, oh, hey, we're going for this, or even better, hey, we got this.
Yeah.
And we're just totally surprised in a great way. So thank you. And thank you for all the hard work that you guys do. We really appreciate the partnership with Sustainable Strategies. But I was wondering if we could get, and I don't know, maybe it's staff, but just, I don't know if it's monthly or every other month, just a kind of that second or third slide you had. Here's what we got going on. Here's what we got coming up. It would just be helpful, I think, for us to go, oh, okay, this is, because somebody said like that $600,000 canopy grant. I had no idea. And that's fantastic. And it's a great surprise. But if we know it's coming up, then we can talk to the public about like, hey, here's what we're doing. And when we get beat up on, oh, the city's throwing this money away, it's always like, well, no, we're going for this grant. And here's what we're trying to do beyond just what is right in front of our face. So I don't know if that's something you provide for other clients or something you'd be able to, or if that's maybe a staff question, but I don't know. What do the rest of y'all think?
Like it?
Yeah, I think Ashley, thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can definitely do that. It's something that some of our clients want, more engagement with council or like a monthly update or whatever. We are happy to provide that. It's stuff that we're tracking this stuff anyway with city staff. So I can, put on my calendar at like the start of the month or something to send Glenwood City Council a brief update on what we're working on and what's coming up. And I think we can do that really easily. And it's actually great for us too, because it does catch me off guard sometimes when I have, the city councils that come to DC and they don't know everything that we're working on. And it's like, man, I need to do a better job of making sure that they know that we're working on all these things as well. So I'd be happy to do that.
And I think even quarterly would be sufficient. Do you want monthly?
I kind of do, because
Really?
there's also a lot of regional stuff
Okay.
that's going on. And
Great.
just if my other.
If you can do it, it sounds like there's a general consensus that if you're cool with trying to get it done monthly, we would so appreciate it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank
I
you,
hear
Ashley.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And just if we can we, if we haven't, get a letter of thank you to Congresswoman Boebert for that earmark? I don't know if we have or haven't, but.
Well, let's.
I think we have, but I will.
Okay.
check. Yeah.
I don't know. If
Okay.
it hasn't been done,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm very
thanks
bad
for-
with thank you notes in general.
Except reminding other people to do them.
I will write it. I always tell my wife, we should write the thank you note.
I'm sure you do. That's
And
exactly
even
it.
if we've already
Right.
sent one, which I know that we've sent at least, a thank you by email, but if we
Yeah.
haven't sent a formal thank you letter, we can
Mhm.
certainly do that when the budget passes as well, to be like, okay, it's, like that's when you'll receive the funding. So.
Yeah.
And I wasn't talking about you, Ashley, necessarily. I was
No,
talking like
us.
from us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and if
But
there's ever a time where in that one monthly email, it's like, hey, city council, please handwrite letters to these people who have been able to support our community with these needs. We are always happy to, pass a card down the dais and get it signed and send it. So thank you. We appreciate your tutelage there. So, Counselor Weimer.
Hey, Ashley, you said the Department of Transportation raise grant, the one that's coming out like maybe next month, you called
Yes.
it, I think, a backstop for Southbridge. Could you explain that?
Sure. So we applied for the full funding gap through the multimodal discretionary grant program. I am skeptical that we will receive a $50 million award. It's quite possible. It's quite possible that if we do receive funding, it would be, maybe half of what we applied for. So by backstop, I meant that if we haven't heard back from rural surface, from the grant that we've already applied to yet, we could apply for the same project to be like a backstop, as in if we don't get all of the funding that we wanted out of the other grant, then we have another bite at the apple through the raised grant program.
Is it possible, it's a wonderful world, we get the full 50 million and then there's more available or no?
I would put that at nearly impossible, that if you get the full 50 million, that through DOT, they would award
nearly,
it.
nearly, that's not a no.
That's correct. But I would put it pretty nearly impossible. Through the federal transportation grant programs. And I do think if we land the big federal grant funds that we've been told by DOLA, and that we could go to CDOT and go back to like the state organizations to look for funding if there were a further gap. But I do think if we get that from DOT, that would be kind of a godsend amount in the first place.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yep.
Any other questions? And also we've got Ashley. We have some department heads as well. If anybody has questions, this is an open forum to ask her, because she is the expert here. Anyone? I think that's an indication that you're really good at what you do. Matt, come on up to the podium.
So I have to?
Yep.
Yes.
Matt Langhorst, come into the podium.
Don't raise your
Hi, Matt.
No questions. They're amazing.
Yes, they are. They really are. Yeah, yeah, we see it's a very quantifiable success story in our relationship with you. And when you see even where we are right now and what we've received from you guys, like from the efforts that you have helped us with, we really appreciate your organization and the relationship that we've developed. So shout out to Deborah Figueroa too, who helped us connect with you also. Thank you so much.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for coming up tonight.
Thank you.
Great to see you all. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, you as well. Okay, bringing it back to council. I think this is for legal counsel to jump in. We have a legislative strategies.
Get some help with this actually, because I suck
Okay.
at that. And I'm not gonna be nearly as good as Ashley.
I asked.
And I'm gonna stand at the podium because I don't have to keep pushing my
He
button.
didn't want to. Talk about later. Hi.
All right, so Steve asked me, we were gonna potentially do this in Q1 of next year, but asked me to, just because we had some time on the agenda. I only have 45 slides, so we should get done about 8:15.
Fun.
To talk a little bit about a legislative summary and kind of our approach, if you will, both as a staff and my law firm, to kind of helping with what has become, I've always feared January through May for the history of my municipal career. The last year, it got really intense on fearing January through May because that's when the legislature is in. And there's just a lot going on and a lot we need to keep track of. Let's see if I can get myself to advance. Yes, no. There we go. Can I get back? There we go.
There you go. Oh,
Hey.
Watch the screen here.
Yeah. This one?
Yeah.
Nope, that's what I did, and then it bounced one. Anyway. Shout out to Angelique who helped put this together, and she thought stacking wood was appropriate for the summary of legislative bills. Just this gives you an idea how many happen every year. So we have about 617 bills that were introduced between the two houses last year. Of those, about 473 passed, a couple of vetoes in there. But anyway, a lot going on in a short period of time. And I don't know if any of you have talked to legislators recently. They all feel, I think, a little overwhelmed on the volume that they have to deal with. So it's very hard for them to be focused as intensely as, say, we were when we worked through the downtown design standards. You're not going to see that kind of ability to spend that kind of time with constituents. So what they hear from the rest of us is really important. So of those 617, around 167 that were passed last year had an impact on municipal governments. So that's kind of the breadth of what we try to keep track of and are thinking about. And that ranges everything from broadband to the criminal justice system to housing, economic development, and everything in between. So how do we track the bills? With limited resources and time that staff has, primarily we rely on a lot of organizations like CML or CAST, other professional organizations, police, fire, public works, transportation. All of those have professional organizations that are also tracking what's going on. Great example is Chief Darris, probably 3 or 4 bills last year you brought to my attention that the Police Chiefs Association was concerned about or wanted comment on. We discussed whether or not to bring it in front of you guys to talk about. Northwest COG is another organization that tracks some of the bills that Jonathan works with. And then frankly, you guys, sometimes you're hearing things you either hear from constituents or you hear because of your profession that you're in, you hear about bills that might be of interest to the council. And then, as we're looking at those, we start evaluating what the priorities are for the city that you've identified through strategic planning. How do those fit in? Decide whether or not, and that's really a conversation between Steve and I primarily and some of the department heads on if it's something that we want to bring forward to you guys to confirm what your position is on it, or is it something that we know what your position is because you've taken a position either recently or we've talked about it. And then we decide the best method to make your position known, whether that is letters, testimonies, calls to legislators, us working behind the scenes as staff contacts, or from active participation in CML and CAST in particular. So for example, I think I have been recruited onto a couple of subcommittees for CAST, whether or not I'm actually formally in CAST or not. Working on a number of different issues around housing primarily this year. I also am on the CML policy committee, and so I've been engaged in that. There's now another attorneys group that has been formed by Bob Sheasley, the CML general counsel, pulling in a smaller group of attorneys to work on housing issues. So I'm going to be participating in that. So we have all of that going on to try to advance what priorities are for this community, what matters to this community. So that's really how we approach it. January is coming up pretty quick. This year in particular, we're spending a lot more time ahead of time. I know a lot of you guys, we had a great meeting with the governor to talk about his priorities. We continue to meet on a regular basis with his staff, starting to hear from individual legislators, both those that directly represent us, whether that's Senator Will, Representative Velasco, or down on the Front Range, a number of senators in particular that I know that I've met over the years, or members of the House working on various issues. I think it's comforting to know that they're reaching out to mountain communities this year around a variety of issues, including tax changes as well as housing changes. So all of that's going on by way of saying it's going to be a busy legislative session. And I think that we will probably try to do a better job than I did last year of keeping you up to date, kind of on the fly, what's going on, what we're hearing, probably mostly in email updates. But then definitely probably asking for more direct engagement as you as electeds, the mayor or other members of council, to make those phone calls or to go down and testify. Because frankly, it makes a difference when we do that. And that's kind of the lesson, tagging on to what Ashley was saying about going back to DC. People don't generally go to Denver as constituents. They tend to rely on meeting the legislators here. When you think about those statistics, they have so much work to do that meeting them at their workplace makes a big difference. And I think it's an area that we can really take advantage of moving forward, is knowing that they're really busy. Maybe we spend a little bit more time driving down to Denver to try to make our voices heard. So I was actually lying on 45 slides, so that's it. Happy to answer any questions. We just kind of thought we'd give you a lay of the land of how we were going to move forward, especially for folks that are new. And I will tell you that as a firm, we are becoming much more formalized, particularly Richard and I, about how we do this, because we're doing so much of it that a little bit of structure makes it much less ad hoc. So happy to answer any questions.
That was great. Thank you, Carl. And I love the idea of the accessibility of Denver. I'm just heading down there and connecting. Any questions? Oh, I think we're going to start saying that it's Councilor Calvin, Councilor Dame, who are the talkers.
Right.
Councilor Gotis.
No, there's always me. I think it'd be good, especially as the legislative session is shaping up and we get a better idea of what bills, and they're starting to see bills come out of committee right now. I think I'm speaking to all of us because we, Carl's right. We all have our hands in different things that we might see, or just different interest points. So I think if there is something in the past, we have brought them before this council, and we have like usually three options. We can take no action. Hey, that's not our bailiwick. This just doesn't apply to us. A vote of support or a vote against. And so I think, I don't know that it changes any votes, but I think it is important because there are times, and I'll be asking later to have council weigh in on a letter for a transportation region. But I think it is important that we bring that before of us to just get our take and to write letters of support and continue that process. So that's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Zelinski.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, honestly, this is another one of those areas where I can say that unless it was something that directly affected me in my industry, I was completely kind of oblivious. And so I would just say, encourage you to disseminate information to us. Don't feel like ever like you're talking down to me, because talk to me like a kindergartner, because I have a feeling that's about the level I'm at with some of this stuff. So, I'm a sponge. Just more information is better, especially at this stage.
Cool. And a big thank you to Mountain Law Firm New Hanlon. You guys are very good at what you do, in particular for small communities on the western slope, mountain towns. And so we're very fortunate to be represented by you all. In particular, we appreciate you, Carl. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys. And I'm gonna leave breaking some computer to somebody else.
Well, we are actually right up to council comments. So I've been told in advance that Counselor Schachter has a handful that he would like to, so we could either front end it or end with him. You guys, okay, go ahead. Counselor.
Several things.
Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead and do your mag.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I don't know what magnet, I don't know what that was.
Several things,
You-
several things.
Okay.
There's been some foreshadowing. I'm not gonna ask for action tonight, but I want to queue up some things. One that, two things quickly that don't involve action tonight are questions. One is, where do we go with the meeting with Laura Minch? We identified some goals
Mhm.
and prioritized strategies. I guess my question will be rhetorical at this point. What do we do with it, both in terms of staff and us? Second one this morning, Ingrid and I went to a VA meeting, a veterans meeting in Glenwood, which was great, well attended. And it pointed out, again, two things. One is a segue. We talked about community outreach. Every meeting I go to, it's amazing how much either misinformation of lack of information is out there. So whatever we can do to supplement Brianna's already full plate or follow up with what we talked about, community outreach supplement somehow would be key. And more specifically, I don't think Ingrid and I had the question. There were two people there dealing with combination of houselessness and resources.
Mhm.
And my question is, who do we go to, or how do we, at least in Glenwood Springs, come up with some kind of resource of list of, if you are looking to rent or find housing, where do you go? Including Match Booth and Bennett and Blake and everything else we have. I don't know that there's a list out there, and anything we can do to facilitate that may help. Those are things that came out this morning. More specifically, that I'll be asking for some action on, and I always like to make work for Hannah. Specifically, I've mentioned this before. I have the feeling, and if council shares it, I think there's some action related to what we passed earlier this year. It's 070, 040, 080, I believe. And when we talked about variety of housing types, we named 9 different things that can be picked from depending on whether you're 20, 40, or 80 units. And everything I hear from us and everything I read says residents occupied is a stronger, it provides a stronger tool than we're currently utilizing to facilitate some of our goals. It doesn't put a income cap on it. It doesn't really inhibit developers as much as income caps, but it creates a let's provide housing for us. So I would encourage us to take a look at that code, that statute we passed or code, and say, with Hannah's help, maybe it gets into the density conversation, or with guidance from housing and P&Z, how do we beef up the RO requirement in any number of ways? I've got some suggestions, but I would encourage us to have a discussion on that as soon as possible, followed by a motion. The other one that you talked about, and of course, Marco is not here, but 070, 030, 030 are short-term rental. We've talked about that, and with Hannah's permission, I will be asking for some action down the road. Maybe Hannah and Emery have pretty current information that help me in terms of what are we facing right now? What are the permits requested? How's the GID affected versus total? And I think even though some of it may be symbolic because of our buffers, I think it would be a good time to take a look at two things. Do we lower our overall cap because we are way below our current allowed cap citywide? And then we also take a little closer look at the dense GID and perhaps even lower that cap. So I would hope maybe disseminate that information if possible that you gave me, and I'd bring it up for specific discussion and motion in the near future. Thank you.
You have a question for
No.
Counselor? Okay, well, and that was it for you?
I
You-
believe that was all I had. Thank you.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, go ahead. Counselor Cotis.
Actually, that was way brief. I was
Yeah, I
expecting
was-
longer. I was
seriously.
getting in the armchair. I think Sumner, I look forward to that conversation on short-term rentals. I think that GID has some, I think we had like 30%. And, yeah, I think it deserves some discussion to see if we're still there or not. I think as part of that conversation, I'd still like to have the conversation of if you have a primary residence and you want to rent that out, this is I've mentioned it before, but that's a very resident specific, benefit for the current people who live in their current home. So I'd love for that to be part of the conversation as well. To your point about the, Veterans Day, or not Veterans Day, the Veterans
Meeting.
meeting.
Veterans,
Yeah, thank you.
Senior Center for Veterans on Colorado.
Okay. We talked about it at the last meeting about having, I think, we called it a community communications, contract, liaison, whatever, an outside firm. I guess I would say I'm not looking for like an official vote because I hate making a vote to make staff work, except when it's your first night, maybe.
Yeah.
But if we could make that, or just if this is a will for us to make this staff's top priority, to get an RFP back in front of us so that we can move ahead with that. There are a lot of groups out there that need to hear this, and we don't know necessarily where these groups are, where they're meeting. We don't have any way to engage the community. And Brianna, you do a fantastic job, but we are putting way too much on you just to get information. You're a fire hose, right? You just get that information out. And you do so much more than that. And what I'm saying is I don't want to replace that. Or certainly you're wonderful. But I do want to provide help and support because that engagement piece back and forth is just not done. So it maybe just a head nod of like, if folks are like, hey, staff, like this is something we feel really strongly about. Obviously we got to keep the lights on and all that other stuff, but
I would say that if we could ask Steve Boyd and Brianna to work together to come up with recommendation for what could be a helpful next step, what costs would be if you guys had that bandwidth, I think that would be great. Is that in alignment?
absolutely.
Okay.
That just the sooner the better for
Okay.
me.
Counselor Zelinski.
Oh.
I would just add to that is
Yeah.
just,
I thought I
I'm
turned it
on,
on. She's
I'm
on. Mhm.
I think that Brianna is supremely positioned to give feedback on what, what would more bolster what you're already doing, what gaps are not being filled, and like help us and like picks what that would be, because like Jonathan said, we want something that will only add to and take some things off your plate that is making it harder for you to do what you're doing. I just see you everywhere. And so there's a big ask. We're asking a lot. And so that's really the biggest thing. So I appreciate that you would be part of that conversation.
Yeah. So thank you. We appreciate in advance the efforts to kind of help us get on track with the community, making sure that the community hears from us and venues that resonate with them, we're accessible and help us get out there. So thank you. Yep. Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
The last thing I have, just as a council comment, there is, was emailed out to you at 4 o'clock today, 4:07 from city manager Steve Boyd, a transportation planning regional boundary study advisory. And this is, I'll try to give you like the 1-minute version of this. Right now, the TPR, transportation regional TPR, transportation planning region. Thank you. Intermountain regional transportation, whatever. IMTPR. Thanks.
Yeah.
That thing. That is, right now it's 5 counties, and just, it hasn't been, these boundaries and this group have not been really looked at in 30 years. And because of that, we have some communities on the front or on the Eastern Plains that have really shrunk, and they're very small TPRs. There's 14 of them. And then there's ours, which has grown to 172,000 people. It's Pitkin, Garfield, Lake, Summit, and Eagle. And we have a lot of lane miles, we have vehicle miles traveled, there's a lot of metrics. And so it has been the recommendation of the Boundary Advisory Study Committee, which was set up with state law, state statute, House Bill 23-1101, to reexamine these boundaries. And the recommendation is that our TPR be broken into two sections. And I think that we in Glenwood, well, a vote was taken, and the communities, Eagle Lake and Summit counties, voted to almost uniformly leave, and that they wanted to have a separation, where almost as uniformly Garfield and Pitkin and those communities voted to stay, and they wanted to stay together. And so, I have a letter in here that if you've had a chance to read it, great. If you haven't, I would love for you to take a look at it, but I'd love to authorize, because there's a timeliness. So if you haven't read it yet, I apologize. I should have gotten that out earlier. But the letter is that we honor those communities that want to leave, that there's been some structural things that, in Glenwood Springs, our transportation corridor is Parachute to Aspen, or even Grand Junction to Aspen, as it were. And so I don't feel, as I sit in these meetings, that I'm prepared to prioritize, because a lot of this is funding and prioritization of funding and make recommendations. And I don't know what's going on in Lake County. I don't know what exit 205 and how that relates, if it relates to us at all, actually. That's an exit in Dillon. And that's something that, oh yeah, well, aren't they the same thing?
It's
Really?
okay.
Thanks. And so, exactly, I don't even know the different towns. I think that speaks to it. And so, and conversely, they don't feel comfortable weighing in on a Southbridge or a Silt or a Newcastle exit. And so I think it makes sense, because regionally we do stuff with Eagle, Pitkin, and Garfield County. And so the recommendations were that these would be broken up in the Roaring Fork Valley, and that Eagle, the other part of Eagle, would go with Lake and Summit, because that's where their economic and workforce hub and tourism, transportation, and travel patterns are. I'd be happy to answer any questions about this at all. And I see some red lights on.
Yeah.
Counselor
A
Schechter.
little bit of proofing at the end. That's one, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But second, but
It's a draft.
two other things. One, in light of our workshop today, and since we're talking about our county.
Yeah.
Is this reasonable to go to the county commissioner and say, hey, here's something we're looking at, and
Yeah.
kind
So,
of bridge some of that gap we talked about this afternoon?
yeah. So Tom and I have go to the same meetings, so we have the exact same conversation. So this is not something that they would be surprised on. We took a vote at the TPR last week, Friday, and their vote was to stay, to keep the group together. My vote was to not. And the reason for that vote was because of the things that are outlined here.
So again, I'd maybe go a little extra step. Tom's on board, he's informed. I would actually consider an interim step that says, hey, based on our conversations and based on mutual interests, and based on the meeting that our representatives done, here's what we're thinking about doing, as long as it's not urgent time-wise, John. Say, you guys on board with this along with us?
So there is urgency, because they're going to make final recommendations on November 16th. So there is urgency to it. And the big reason is we would get an extra vote, because we'd have another region. We would have now the mountain region and Western Slope would have an additional vote on staff, which is probably the biggest reason we want to do
So
this.
we have 14 days. Is there a way to at least verbally, if not in writing, reach out to connect maybe with Tom and say, hey, based on what we talked about at our workshop today, and based on what you and I heard, any problems with us expediting this and moving forward?
I don't think I'll be too far on a limb to say that they are opposed.
That's what I was gonna say. He just said that they voted against it.
They voted.
They voted against it, right?
That was like.
Yeah.
All right, I'll bite my tongue.
Yeah, Counselor Zelinski.
So that was all. My light was on because I was gonna say, I think you misunderstood what he said. They're not in alignment with this. So this would be one more dissent.
So this is a case of our interests versus their dissent for
So
what reason.
I did have a question,
Okay.
actually. I
Thank
was
you.
gonna ask, why, did he indicate why his vote was no? Just so that we can have an understanding of where the difference of opinion is.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Is one of the reasons. There is not additional, right now, there's not additional money for the 5 counties. It would be the same amount of money, but we would get an additional vote. And so I think that's why we support it. And honestly, I don't want to hold 3 other counties into a group
Right.
that don't want to be in a group. And so to me, that's not the whole reason to do it or to not to do it. But by state statute, if you combine or break up, you have to have 14 TPRs, have to, or 15, it's 15. So if one breaks up, you have to combine the other. And so what it is, and there's a whole presentation I've been a part of for 6 months, but it is like the 2 that would combine is a southeast and south central. Yeah, south central. If you combine those two combined would be about half of our population, lane miles, vehicle miles traveled of the new, each one. And so it's balancing out, and this started through the legislative process because as things move, it's like redistricting, right?
So that's what I was
Yeah.
just, so I do have one other question. That.
Yeah, so basically it's a redistricting thing. I mean, if you want to look at it like that, because when we have extra votes and we have a stronger voice, I mean, it allows us to make our case for our region a little more succinctly. I won't speak for anything other than I've heard Commissioner Janikowski say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But 3 of the 5 counties and their municipalities, all of their municipalities, except with the exception of Vail. But every single one of them said, we don't feel like we don't feel like something's working well enough here, or conversely, and it's in the letter, we see a future that would make it work better for us in this other way. And so I don't have a huge beef in this or stake in this. I think that it creates more focus on the I-70 corridor. I think having 2 TPRs, 3, because Mesa County is their own TPR, having 3 TPRs on the western slope, they're all advocating for I-70, and 2, which are advocating for Glenwood Canyon and Cottonwood Pass, is going to bring more attention to the State Transportation Committee, the STAC. And that information and that vote and those advisory votes will get more weight with CDOT.
And Independence Pass is another big part of
Correct.
that. Okay, so is there a downside to this? Is there a cost associated? Is there something negative other than going contrary to county commissioners?
No, I mean, I'm trying to think of what the downsides I've heard of that were discussed. And the only downside was it seemed to have worked so far. But I think the counties that have voted to stay, maybe it has worked really well, but maybe the counties that want to leave it hasn't. So maybe we're doing ourselves a disservice if we've been loading up a lot of the money in the projects here at the expense of other counties. I'm not saying that's what's happened or not, but if that is the case, then maybe we are shooting ourselves a little bit in the foot. But I also don't want to pit ourselves against our neighbors if I can avoid it.
Councilor Otis, the only other thing that I've heard is
Yeah.
kind of the community of interest around the canyon in particular, splitting kind of that and Cottonwood Pass from a kind of a macro view, because it's it has over the last few years, it's become such a known, like, integral part of the transportation system, and what, good or bad, that's just one of the, when you were talking about one of the downsides potentially is that now becomes split between 2 TPRs and doesn't actually get the attention it needs as a result of that, because it's not a priority for both sides.
And so it's interesting because we had a straw poll on October 6th, that a special meeting, and that straw poll, it was 2-1 that we should split up the TPRs. But you have to be at the meeting to have a vote. And so the last meeting, we had a lot of letters saying from those other 3 counties saying we should split, but we didn't have a lot of attendance. So the official vote was, I think, 12-6 to keep it together, but that was heavily represented by Pitkin and Garfield County. The previous meeting was heavily attended by the other 3 counties, and it was almost reversed. And the 3 options were stay together, so a do nothing option. It was split the region into being all of Eagle County, as Carl said, to keep that together, because they don't like to split counties. They just don't. The state doesn't like to split
Right.
counties up in these things. Or to do this. And I think the thing that got the most votes was to keep Garfield, or to keep Eagle County whole, but barely over split Eagle County up. And then third place was no action. Matt Scher, the Eagle County Commissioner, and several other people went back, got information saying, yeah, it actually does make sense to break up Eagle County because, you know, that community of interest along the 82 corridor is stronger than the Cottonwood and Glenwood Canyon. And so Matt Scher's comment was, well, if we have 2 TPRs advocating for this, that actually brings, in his mind, more attention to it.
So.
Hold
again,
on
I'm-
1 second. Let's get you lit up. Oh, hold on. You know, actually Mitchell was ahead of you, so I'm jumping. Then we'll-
I was just gonna ask, is this letter necessary? And what happens if it doesn't get sent?
CDOT is asking any communities that are impacted, whether it be in the southeast, the south central, or the Intermountain TPR, to write a letter, to weigh in on this. And so that's their request. And I think if we want to have a voice, now is the time to do it. I think if we don't weigh in on it, it just means we let a ball go by and we don't have a voice in it. So nothing bad happens. I don't think anything, we're not gonna get our hands slapped. We're not gonna get less funding or anything
And
like that.
a letter could potentially change the outcome of the vote.
No, I don't think so. Well, I don't know. I mean, they are asking for letters.
Yeah.
So the recommendation, let me be clear. The recommendation on the October 6th meeting was to split up. The recommendation, the official vote on the October 27th meeting was to stay together. And based on that conversation and the conversation with the Southeast and South Central, CDOT has made a recommendation to the legislature, because it's got to be a legislative action. They're going to make a recommendation to split up. So the state is right now that the recommendation would be to split up, but they are asking us for reasons why, for where do we feel on this, and if we support it or not.
So.
Did that answer your question? Okay, Counselor Schachter.
Thank you, because again,
I'm gonna
I
leave you
know
on.
very little. So 2 things. One, John, is there kind of taken more of a worst case scenario? If we split these, was it TDRs?
TPRs.
TPRs.
If we split it, what is it? Yes, we have an extra vote, if I heard you correctly. However, now we have a very powerful group to the east of us. What assurance do we have, if any, that their priorities align with ours in terms of the Canyon or Cottonwood, as opposed to, no, we need to get more traffic from Denver to us, versus now we're kind of unified, and I'm wondering, what is the chance of diluting our influence, ironically, over the Canyon and Cottonwood and other things based on this?
So there's a reason why there's 3 of the 5 counties that want to split. And I would say that is, you just nailed it right on the head, that there is not, and there is different priorities and different levels of participation, and there's different because what is a transportation planning region. So we get together and we determine what are the big projects we are going to be looking at over the next 10 years, and we refer that to CDOT to get funding. So it's very important to have representation on this. Terry Parch was the co-chair of it. It was really something she felt was very important. And quite frankly, we had an incident a couple of years ago where the group voted, every county gets 2 priorities, and the group as a whole said, okay, everybody made their case on, what are the 2 things in each county, and Southbridge and interchange in Silt were the top 2 priorities. And that was the group put their stickies on it, said, yep, that sounds great. That's what we're looking at doing, voted on it. A couple months later, we find out that Southbridge got pulled. We had no idea where, we had no idea how, we don't know how it happened. And so I think also a smaller group probably creates a little bit more transparency and accountability towards that. But, to your question or your concern of what happens if we break up and then we get conflict, I would say that not being part of a group and wanting to break up is, it's there, we're there.
And is there any advantage in this letter, or maybe it's very specific? Yes, 2 TPRs or 1. Is there any advantage? Because this letter does not state any priorities on our end. Is there any advantage to restating the obvious with CDOT saying, yeah, we support this, however, we don't want these priorities diluted due to this? I don't know.
I think that that's something absolutely we can include. I mean, I think I have language in there that talks about, being more focused and having a smaller group. But if we want to add language that's more specific to Glenwood and more specific to manageable specific regions, then I think that's great. I don't want to get into a wordsmithing by committee,
Right.
because again, there's a time limit on this. And so, not to belabor this another 17 minutes, but I think that, yeah, I know. I think that, it's a binary question. Do we support staying together? Do we support splitting the 2 TPRs? And if we do, the other question is, do we want to take a stance? We've been asked to take a stance. So do we take a stance on it, or do we not? Because we don't have to. But if we do, we don't have a lot of time to run it up the proverbial flagpole and to have a lot of wordsmithing, because there's a tight turnaround on this. And I apologize, because I should have gotten this out yesterday. I was asked to bring this up yesterday, and I just was not able to get to it till today. So if you're seeing it for the first time and don't feel comfortable with it,
Well,
what it is.
unfortunately, sometimes this timing. I'm going to jump in really quickly and say that I have I don't have a really solid, strong understanding of this, but I have a very cursory understanding of this. And I would say that the benefit to this by, reallocating these districts to kind of separate some bigger ones and taking that southwest corner that doesn't maybe have the same population and reallocating it so that we kind of separate into 2 does add the additional vote. And when you're sitting at the table, it allows you to better advocate for the priorities for your region. And I think that's what's happened in the expanded area, is we become like really truly a strong transportation hub in these specific areas. But then there are some rural mountain areas that don't have that same advocacy because they don't have the vote at the table. So for me, I am going to be supportive of Jonathan's letter because I think that there's a rationale behind it. I'm in this one. I don't think that I'm not as worried about other stakeholders in this as much as I am believing like this is a good thing for our community. So I am comfortable supporting your letter as it's written this evening with the amendments if there's typos in it. But I do believe that there's a rationale for this. And also it's simply a recommendation. It's simply a statement to say, we're hearing from our neighboring communities that this is beneficial to them. And I find it to be beneficial for our community as well. So
just real quick, it just occurred to me, in all fairness, to talk about, other reasons why not. Tom mentioned several times at the meeting that, and I don't know if counties have a different relationship with other counties, but he said that he didn't want to screw the Southeast and the South Central TPRs by making them combine, because that would give them one less vote. And while that would give us one more vote and more power and more voice, it would impact negatively the counties, the less populated, less vehicle lane mile counties in the Southeast. And so that was another reason he said that he had some heartburn about it.
Sure.
I just want to put that out there so it didn't look like I was.
Yeah. Okay. Would you, do you want to put a motion out there?
Yeah, sure. I guess I would just motion that we, concerning errors and omissions, which I will hopefully have people who are much better at proofreading than I apparently am. But send this letter to the Transportation Planning Regional Boundary Study Advisory Committee and CC Shoshana Liu, the CDOT Executive Director, about our intention or our recommendation from this council to separate into 2 TPRs.
And I will second it. Counselor Weimer.
So I don't think I'm going to support this. It feels unnecessary. I mean, correct me if I'm off on any of this. It doesn't feel totally necessary. We've been asked for an opinion. We don't have to give one. There are benefits. I mean, there's pros and cons to either side, right? Whether we stay together, whether we break apart. The state seems to have some momentum already moving in one direction, almost independent of any letter that we would write. And just coming off of our work session today, it feels like maybe an unnecessary poke in the eye.
Okay.
When we're trying to maybe fix that relationship a little bit. So it's like 51-49 to me, and I'm 51.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments before we call the question? Okay, let's go ahead and call the question on the. Oh, Aaron, sorry, Counselor Zelinski.
I was gonna say, I'm kind of in the same boat as Mitchell. Only because like, I don't think you've convinced me yet that it's like kind of in our best interest. And so I would like to say, is there anything you can say that you can really feel like it would sell it, that it is in our best interest to take a stance? Or is it best to just kind of let it, work itself out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
Mike.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Counselor Cotis. Because he didn't actually request the mic.
Sorry. Yeah, I think that, I don't have like a closing speech or anything, but I think the, CDOT higher ups have asked us to weigh in, partly because we're in Garfield County and I voted to let the 3 counties that wanted to leave just leave.
Right.
And so they were interested to hear from us. They were interested to hear from other communities that voted to stay. And so I think they really, as part of a public process, they really do want to hear from the communities. And so if we don't, that's fine. I don't think this thing rises or falls with us. But I also don't think that this is a poke in anybody's eye at all, because there's a lot of communities that, a majority of the communities in those counties, well, all of them, don't want to be a part of it. And so I guess my thing is, why would we want to be a part of a group that doesn't want to be part of us?
So that was, so for clarity, was your vote to let them leave?
Yes.
And it really wasn't so much about us, it was
No.
about them.
No, it's not about us.
So,
It's not a proactive.
So I would say that, it would be for me more clear and transparent to write the letter and to say, I have no opposition to this. I don't want to be part of a group that doesn't really want to be part of our group. And I don't see where it's in our best interest to continue to collaborate with a group that doesn't feel aligned with us. Which is why I voted for it, but I'm not advocating, for it the other way. And I think that that's a more neutral position.
Yeah.
That more, I think, adequately or accurately expresses how I feel about it.
Okay. So I think we could put something, I think I can amend that motion to include that of the maybe, you know, I have 5 different things of, you know, just different things, different lane miles, different rationales.
Right.
But I think if we not even include that as a number, but maybe as a headline,
That's what I was thinking, like
Yeah.
kind of as an introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you got that?
Yeah.
So to clarify, we will have,
Acknowledging that 3 of the counties would like to. leave
Acknowledging-
the IMTPR and that the rationale for which they gave was the 5 points that Jonathan laid out. And that, you know, we recognize that if they don't want to be part of the IMTPR, then it should be their choice to exit.
that's correct. And so my number 5
Yeah.
point. Maybe we can move that to number 1. Summit County, Lake, and Eagle County, along with nearly every municipality in those counties, have expressed support in breaking the ITMPR into 2 separate TPRs. When 3 of the 5 counties express a desire to leave the existing IMTPR, we feel those voices should be acknowledged and honored. Whether they feel the current ITMPR does not work well for them or they feel a new makeup would have additional benefits, Glenwood Springs doesn't feel comfortable standing in the way of these counties to self-determine.
I think that,
Should we move that to number 1 or?
or even like,
That's the whole.
yeah.
The whole
yeah,
message.
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Perfect.
To me, that seems adequate
Yeah.
right there.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah.
okay, we'll just,
So-
acts items,
1 through
Uh,
4.
yeah,
Okay.
okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you.
So to be very clear, the letter that was in, at last, like a late add-on will be amended to simply just have the 1 bullet point. And that is your motion to approve that we as city council sign on to that. And that is to really big picture, just supporting those neighboring communities and kind of meeting the goals that they would wanted to meet.
I'm great.
Okay, great. I'll amend my second to align with that. And we can call the question.
It passes 5-0.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, that was a little tortured. And I want to apologize for not bringing this before council earlier. I didn't know that it would be, I didn't even know I'd be required to vote on it last Friday. So thanks for allowing me the opportunity to go through that and appreciate that.
Any additional council comments? Nope.
Sorry.
Okay. Our official city manager, Steve Boyd, I don't have to say interim anymore.
Yeah, just 2 quick things. There was a slide at the mine in January. And Rocky Mountain Industrials hired an engineering firm called Kilduff Underground Engineering out of Denver to come up and assess the situation. The report that they issued to RMI noted a number of fairly serious safety issues and concerns. And the Glenwood Springs Citizens Alliance has contacted us and they have written a letter that basically calls for the continuing cessation of activities until the recommendations in that letter can be implemented and some other, environmental stuff gets done. And they want us to write a letter just in support of their letter. This just happened this week, so I couldn't get it on the agenda, and they're trying to get it out next week to control the narrative. So we can't really have an official, discussion about it, but I was just looking for a head nod from everybody to see if that's okay.
Do you want a motion or a head nod?
Head nod's fine with me.
Okay, great.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Second thing is there was a terrible incident that happened up at the caverns. And I think we'll probably end up having to talk a little bit more about that. But I was going to ask Chief Darris if he would just spend, a quick minute from our law enforcement's perspective to say a couple things to you guys.
So good evening, everybody. I'm quick to acknowledge I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and my wife will confirm that for you all. And so I recognize right now I'm in between you and maybe some adult beverages, so I'll make this brief. So to begin with, I have to share and remind people that don't know, I live in Glenwood Springs. Our children attend schools here. We shop at the same markets that everybody else patronizes. And I share the same concerns from my family and our community that everybody else has. As your chief, I'm laser focused in making sure that there are no gaps or blind spots in our obligation that we've chosen to assume responsibility for the safety of residents and our visitors. My remarks tonight are not intended to persuade you to agree that we are on the right side of history with respect to our effectiveness, but rather to demonstrate to you and to our community our level of commitment and bring solace to you as community leaders that your police department is on the front end of these tragedies rather than taking a wait and see approach. Too often, I believe many in our community, they've told me as much, have held that violent events happen somewhere else. They don't happen in Glenwood Springs. This strongly held belief that this won't happen to us in our small town. This weekend's tragedy is a demonstrable event that should bring the realization that we're not in the same place as a town or as a country as we all knew growing up. In fact, this one actually angers me a little bit. Just last night, our police officers responded to a local hotel right in the middle of town where we had two men draw AR-15 and an AK-47 and point it at another male who was also a resident of or patron of that hotel. As I stand before you right now, a judge this afternoon felt it appropriate to release both of those men from custody pending further proceedings at some point in the future. The victim in that event was arrested for an unrelated charge. He actually was given more jail time, spent more time in custody over the last 24 hours than those two guys with assault weapons and AK-47s. And I don't want to get into a political debate about those, but nonetheless, they can cause some serious damage. The situation last weekend is an open criminal investigation, which lies within the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office. We provided supplemental resources, and beyond that, I cannot provide any information regarding that case. But I will tell you that I was in contact with Sheriff Valerio several times throughout the day as we evaluated any threats to our community beyond the confines of that park. I did speak with the city manager and provided him with updates and later connected with the city attorney as well. I was also in contact with special agents of the FBI, and I'm confident that they are positioned and willing to assist us immediately if or when needed. I've said this in the past, but with some newer council members here, and now with this recent local event, I cannot overstate it enough that I do not have any higher priority in my mind than our police department's level of readiness and preparation, which includes our training regimen in order to respond to any active threat situation that we have in our community. Just prior to the beginning of this school year, we ran a large-scale training event at a local school. We're going through another series of training drills that were already pre-scheduled before this event during the winter school break, and invite any of you to connect with me to observe or engage in that and participate as role players or whatever you might choose to do. I seek out and receive materials daily regarding these events, national trends, underground activities, dark websites, hosting platforms for violent actors, and best practices to address offenders in mass casualty events. In an effort to ensure that we have contemporary protocols and robust training practices, I attend post-event debriefings frequently. I've met with and I've spoken around the country to various agencies, including the FBI's training administrators at the Bureau's headquarters regarding responses to active threats. We have committed significant funds each year toward the equipment and training specifically fashioned around our responses for such an event, to include supplementing our training cadre with experienced outside experts coming to Glenwood Springs. As an example, within the last 2 weeks and before this event happened at the park, we sent a small group of our staff from the police department to Waukesha, Wisconsin. I'd previously seen a presentation from them. Our staff reviewed the mass casualty event that they endured at an annual town Christmas parade. The offender in that event used a motor vehicle traveling at about 40 miles per hour through the parade route, killed 6 people and injured 62 others. The ages of those victims were from 8 years old to 81 years old. 4 of the dead were members of a group called the Dancing Grannies, a dance group comprised primarily of grandmothers. You'll recall that we have a similar parade every year in the summertime, though, and so I'm very concerned that we have proper protocols and safety measures in place to avert something like that. That's the point of the expense in sending our team members across the country to learn about that event. The point of that meeting with Waukesha officials was to understand their preparation, technology use, and modifications to their response plan moving forward. Further was to bring lessons learned back to Glenwood Springs as we continue to improve our security plans for our own parade and annual summer event. I believe we're planning to connect in the coming weeks, all of us, to discuss specific security and safety measures, and look forward to sharing more specific and detailed information with you at that time. But I'll defer to the city manager and Mr. Hanlon to arrange for that conversation. So with that, I hope this provides you with some confidence when thinking about our families, your families, and answering questions in the community about our capacity to address these threats in our wonderful community. I know there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of angst and anxiety behind these kinds of things. just can't really get into the specific details. It's an ongoing criminal investigation, which we do not control. That relies with the sheriff's office. But as you're approached or asked questions, I just want you to have this information at this point, feel very confident where we're at, the investments that we've all made in our budget process, the training that we've done, and the dedication we have to making sure that if something happens, we're properly prepared to respond to it and minimize the casualties and something like that. So I apologize for the lengthy statement. Those are talking points I thought were important to share with you, and I'm happy to answer questions that you may have to the extent that I might.
Does anybody have any questions?
I
I
just wanna
did-
say thank you. That
yeah.
was-
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
big
you.
picture, we thank you. I mean, big pic, like to step back and knowing that you were all here, that you have prioritized training, that we had systems in place gives us that comfort, even in this moment of tragedy for that young man's family and just the community. That our confidence has been shook. So thank you. We appreciate you all, including the county and the local city, FBI, all agencies. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Chief. We've had a couple of conversations, working through a few issues, thinking about these things, and I can't think of somebody that I've met or worked with who has been as dedicated as Chief Terrace is. I also wanted to welcome Steve on board, and he also mentioned that since it's past 8 o'clock, he has a rule that it must be 8:15. So I think we're inside of that.
Nice. I like this tier. It's wonderful. Does that mean he's buying? Is that,
No,
is that
it's
what you
not.
just said?
It's okay.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, thank you. So, to bring it back, I just want to say thank you to City Manager Steve Boyd for your willingness to take on this position. The community is fortunate to have you. I think the community will start giving us great feedback in the coming days and weeks as they learn of this appointment of someone who grew up here, has connections here. And we're really grateful for your expertise and knowledge already. All of the leadership that you have provided in the last year and a half. Thank you. The community and this city is really, really, this organization, we're really lucky to have you.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, have a good night all. Yeah, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Social event.
Oh, social event.
Yeah.
There's a social event. Where are y'all going? I'm not going out tonight. Usually Marco identifies the social event.
It's 8 o'clock.
Mike.
Okay,
have 7:59.
What do you say we swing by Casey's?
okay, there we go.
Are we okay with Casey's?
A motion to adjourn?
Okay. So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks.